Oh, hello, and welcome to the third webinar in our 2015 High Tunnel webinar series. I'm Miranda Combs, and I'm an Extension Associate with the Center for Crop Diversification at the University of Kentucky. Today we'll learn about organic production and certification in high tunnels, along with economic and marketing considerations in high tunnels. Adam Watson, the Organic Program Manager at the Kentucky Department of Agriculture, will cover the certification process and how it relates to high tunnel production. Then Dr. Tim Woods, a UK professor in the Department of Agricultural Economics, will talk about the economics and marketing in high tunnel systems and share some great Center for Crop Diversification resources that are available for you. I also want to remind everyone that the recordings of our past two webinars are available on the Center for Crop Diversification website, along with the documents referenced during each webinar. Please visit our website and navigate to our events page. All the archived webinars will be available in the right column of that page. Just a few quick housekeeping notes. To ask questions, simply type your questions into the chat box in the lower right corner of your screen. Christy Cassidy from the Center for Crop Diversification will be helping us answer questions throughout the presentation. Also, the webinar is being recorded and will be available in a few days on the Center for Crop Diversification's events page. Finally, at the end of the webinar, we'll have a survey link available for you to provide some feedback for us. We really appreciate and listen to the feedback you provide. We hope you enjoy the presentation tonight and take away some great information. Without any further ado, I will hand the presentation over to Adam Watson. Welcome, Adam.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to come here tonight. Organics is one of those things that has always seen a lot of interest, but as we see more and more producers wanting to have a distinction in the marketplace, they look to organic. And so it is a program that's been growing for us, so we're always happy to open the discussion. So I think always the first step is, what is organic? In truth, organic is a labeling term, and that's important to recognize. Often people want to bring certain opinions or feelings about organic to the table. And while that's perfectly fine, the reality is it's a labeling term in regards of the government oversight. And so what that means is we have regulations related to that. They're found in Section 205 of Chapter 7 of the Federal Code of Regulations. Chapter 7 is agriculture, and 205 is organic, certification and agriculture production. We'll often refer to this inside the organic community as the rule or the regulations. And so that's what we're talking about. And what these regulations set out and establish are guidelines that allow entities such as Kentucky Department of Agriculture to certify a producer in order that they may use that organic label. So organic certification at its base is a third-party verification. It's a certification program where a disinterested third party comes in and evaluates your operation, makes sure that you're adhering to those regulations, and if you are, it allows you the ability to market yourself as certified organic. It's under the control of the USDA, or United States Department of Agriculture, and within there, the National Organic Program. One thing I always like to touch on is sometimes the common misperceptions that exist with organic. If we look to the media sometimes or various things, we can see where there's assumptions made that organic is all natural or that there are no synthetics allowed. In truth, there are some synthetics. For instance, to me, one of the best examples is the use of plastic mulch in vegetable production. Producers can use plastic mulch. They do have to pull it up at the end of the season, so there are limitations. And while there is the general caveats, you cannot use synthetics, there are actually sections of the rule that specifically allow some synthetics. Additionally, not everything that is natural is allowed. So there are actually sections of the rule that disallow certain natural elements. So it's important to realize organic, while it may have some general trends to it, there are very specific things and requirements that we have to meet in order to utilize it. So who has to be certified? So let's say you want to market as organic. If you're going to be selling more than $5,000 of gross organic product, doesn't matter what that is, you will have to be certified. If you're selling less than $5,000, you only have to be registered with the Kentucky Department of Agriculture. What this allows is for the very small, the very early beginning operations to not face the requirement to have to go through the certification process. A lot of federal rules and regulations have exemptions for small and very small producers, and this was the exemption for those under these regulations. We actually don't find we have too many of these in Kentucky. Occasionally folks will start out in this category, but very quickly they move to where they're having greater than $5,000 worth of sales. So we're happy to see that. But it is, if you're starting on a limited size, it's a good place to begin. These exempt operations still have to follow all the same regulations, but they don't have to go through the step of certification. When we're talking about certification, we're actually talking about different categories that you'd be classified into. There's actually four. Those consist of crop, which basically is anything plant-based. It would also include maybe things you don't first think of, such as pasture or forages, livestock, any animals or their products. Livestock certification would require a crop certification as well, because those animals have to be on certified ground and have to be on certified pasture, etc. Additionally, processed products, or handling as it's typically referred to within the regulations. That's any sort of processing, anything post-harvest. So it ranges everything in Kentucky from coffee roasters who are just roasting an organic bean that's been imported, to people making organic drinks, to bakers, etc. So any sort of processing, chopping, anything that would be considered a process under like food safety guidelines would have to be certified under the handling or processing scope. There's also a category for wild crops. These are plants that are growing wild, not cultivated. We actually currently in Kentucky, I don't believe, have anyone certified in this category, but it is an option out there that some people choose to go with. Basic requirements for certification. Any ground that you're going to be certifying has to be free from prohibited substances for a minimum of 36 months. And what this means is you can't have applied any traditional fertilizers, any sort of pesticides, treated seed, and that includes things like inoculants, to this ground for a period of 36 months. So oftentimes we find pastures or hay fields that will actually meet this requirement without any further ado. But if it's an actively cropped field, obviously you're going to have a transition period. During the transition period, you can't sell your products as certified organic. You actually can't refer to organic anyway while you're selling those, because it could be misleading to people and cause them to think that it actually is a certified product. Whenever we're talking about, what can you do? What are the approved methods? There's actually kind of one overhanging principle that the entire rule operates under. And it's methods that integrate cultural, biological, mechanical practices that foster recycling of resources, promote ecological balance, and conserve biodiversity. I think the second part of that statement is the most important. With organic, you're really approaching agriculture in a slightly different way than you would from a conventional background. Occasionally you'll have a new producer that comes into organic and looks at simply substituting an allowed organic product for what they would have used while a conventional grower. What we see with our most successful and our most experienced certified organic producers is they approach things differently. Typically, they have very few inputs. They work to manage a farm environment that is conducive to beneficials. So they have fewer pest problems. They look at selecting cultivars that are most resistant to pests. They look at cover cropping, green manures, rotations, things of that nature that help ensure fertility for their operation. So it is about creating systems. It's not just about substituting an allowed product for a disallowed one. It is worth mentioning there are kind of the big three that are disallowed from organic production. That would be sewage sludge, irradiation, and genetic engineering or GMOs. So if you have producers that are interested in GMOs or looking for a non-GMO label, we actually already have that in the country with the certified organic label. So that's an important aspect that some consumers definitely search out. It is worth mentioning with sewage sludge, it goes by a much more genteel name of biosolids, uh, but occasionally you will actually find a product that contains sewage sludge or biosolids that actually also mentions in their name organic. The reason they're able to do this is while the USDA controls the word organic when it comes to labeling of products, it applies only to agricultural products. And so fertilizers and compost and things of that nature are not agricultural products under the law, and therefore they can use the word organic to describe themselves, even though they contain ingredients themselves that are completely disallowed. So do be aware of that, and we'll talk about that more a little bit later on. Another big one that sometimes catches people if they're not careful, and it's one I personally always say it had to be written by someone who's never dug a post hole, is no treated lumber. There's no allowance for treated lumber within the operation where it can contact the soil or animals and plants. So that is one requirement that you do have to meet. I may not like it, but we do enforce it. Records are very important to organic. If you're familiar with other third-party verification systems, even those outside of agriculture, like staffing levels of nurses at hospitals, records are vital to that process. And the reason is an inspector's going to come in and basically be there once a season, once a year. And because of that, they need some verification that what they actually witness the day they're there happens day in and day out. The only method we have to do that is records. And so records are very key. Sometimes what I find is producers try to keep records on everything, about everything, and they kind of miss some of the important things that I want them to keep. So we'll actually talk about some of the most important records that we'd like to see whenever we come on operation and why we ask for those records so you understand what we're looking for and how to best utilize your time in that manner. Some of the very big general things, anytime we're talking about production, you got to follow all the rules, not just the ones most convenient or that you like. In general, you can say no synthetics, but again, there are exceptions, and those exceptions are specifically mentioned within the regulations. Whenever we're talking about seed, plants, bulbs, tubers, or perennial plants, you have to first search and look for certified organic. If what you're looking for is commercially unavailable, then you may substitute untreated conventional sources. So there's a couple of things there. First, commercially unavailable. Whenever I'm saying that phrase, it's very specific. What we're talking about is you can't find the variety you want to plant. That's something coming from a production background I'm very sensitive to. I'd never ask somebody to substitute one variety for another. There's a reason why UK and others do all their trialing to find those varieties that perform best in your area. And so we would never ask you to depart from those simply to have a certified organic seed or other propagule. Additionally, if you can't find the quantity you need, so if you can find it in half-ounce packets, but you need 10 pounds of it, I'm not going to make you buy hundreds of packets to get there. Additionally, quality. So if you can't find the quality of seed you need. The good thing is, even from just a few years ago, the availability of certified organic seed is tremendously better. If you're adept at using the internet, you can very often find what you're looking for specifically in a certified organic form. And we encourage you to do that because keep in mind, anytime you're buying certified organic seed, you're supporting another certified organic farmer. And there's no better way to have greater availability and options in the marketplace than to show seedsmen that you're willing to buy organic product. So that is one that you have to first demonstrate it wasn't available to us. Then when we talk about untreated conventional, this sometimes gets a little sticky because of language differences between the organic community and within the seed world. If we were to go to a seed house and start looking through their legume seeds, like clover, for instance, we could find clover seed with an untreated statement on the tag, but it would be treated with some sort of coating or inoculant for when you plant it. The problem is they consider untreated to be absent from a pesticide, typically a fungicide. What I need untreated to be is absent of everything. That's not allowed. And so that would include coatings that allow seeds to flow better, inoculants that allow for rhizobium to form, and basically any sort of other treatment that may be present on that seed. Now, there are treatments that are perfectly acceptable and allowed, but those will typically be called out and specifically cited on the tags. And it'd be, I think, highly unusual to find an acceptable seed treatment on a conventional seed. And part of that is just due to cost. So, stepping away from seeds for a moment, seedlings must always be certified organic. And, we can define seedlings as not just, an annual transplant for tomatoes. It can also apply to strawberry plugs are considered seedlings because they're grown for one season typically. And so do be aware that seedlings always must be certified organic. Whenever we're talking about inputs, and sometimes you'll hear organic referred to as pesticide free. It's not entirely true. There's any number of pesticides that are allowed and can be used. It's just synthetic pesticide free, perhaps, if you wanted to label it that way. But whenever we're talking about these inputs, there's an easy way to go about selecting ones that are acceptable for organic certification. The Kentucky Department of Agriculture, as a certifier, is able to accept other designations and thereby allow products. So OMRI, the Organic Materials Review Institute, they are actually an entity that reviews products and judges them acceptable for organic production. So any product that is listed on OMRI's list, and I do say plural because they have a number, those are acceptable to us. Additionally, Washington State Department of Agriculture has a program where they create lists. Anything listed on theirs is acceptable for anybody that's certified by us. And we also recognize Pennsylvania Certified Organic, or PCO. Their list is one that we automatically accept. And we will provide those to anyone at once. OMRI in Washington are easily accessible online. They have in fact, I prefer to use the online rather than a printed set because they're large and it can take a while to find something and it's much easier just to search for it electronically. PCO, that's something we'll have to provide to you printed because that's something we do pay for. That's not publicly available, but we can make that available even for people that are transitioning. Additionally, if you can't find a product that you're interested in using, you can ask for Kentucky Department of Agriculture to evaluate that product, and that would be us in the organic program. So we will review those. Depending on the time of year, that can take some time, and depending on the willingness of the product manufacturer, it may or may not be possible. Some product manufacturers are very good to work with, very fast at getting responses back to us. Others we have to hound and we never hear anything from. So quite honestly, it's not the best option, but it is one that you can choose to exercise. Talking a little bit about the certification process, and I should mention, Kentucky Department of Agriculture is a certifier. There's approximately 80 to 90 certifiers within the world. You're welcome to choose any certifier you choose, so you don't have to choose the Kentucky Department of Agriculture just because you are in Kentucky. I will say we are much, much cheaper than everybody else because we don't charge our cost, and so we get most of the business at Kentucky. The basic process, no matter who your certifier is first you complete an application or organic system plan. Once you complete that, you send it in to the certifier with supporting materials and appropriate fees. It's reviewed for completeness. We have to evaluate that and determine if you actually could possibly be certified. So there are a lot of questions we ask. We don't ask anything more than what we absolutely have to have. But some of those OSP questions do get lengthy at times. We recognize that. We've made some changes within the department so that we hope it's more efficient for producers. We've gone to word fillable forms. And we're wanting to see those kind of become more of a living document than something you fill out once a year and throw in a drawer. So we're hoping you'll actually be retaining those in a binder, updating them throughout the season, and actually maybe utilizing them directly for some of your record keeping. But so once we find an application submission is complete, what we would do is assign it to an inspector. They would work with you to arrange a time to come out to your operation. It would have to be when there's something meaningful happening. So, for instance, if you were wanting to grow tomatoes outdoors, we're probably not going to show up to your farm to do a inspection now, even if you sent us the application 4 weeks ago. It's simply that we need to be on the farm witnessing something meaningful to that operation when it's in production. And so we do delay. It's not something that's instantaneous. Whenever we get your application, we're able to come out and do it. Depending on the time of year, there can be quite a delay at times. We do give priority to new applicants, but we are limited in the amount of personnel that we have. After that inspector contacts you and arranges, they'll come out. Really big tip for a good inspection is to be organized with your records. It'll make it go quicker so you can get back to doing what you do best, which is farming. And it also lets the inspector have a better feeling about it. Whenever you go into an operation and they're disorganized, they don't know where everything is, it's kind of sometimes hard just to accept on the surface that, okay, everything's okay. So we may actually start digging even deeper if we think there is some sort of impropriety because you don't have certain records available to us. When I'm talking about records, the kind of things we're interested in reviewing are things like receipts, seed tags, field activity records, where you're actually writing down what you're doing. Lots of times those are on calendars or things of that nature. Input use, so what products did you use where, how much, sales records. It's not so much that we're worried about the amount of money you're making on sales, but it's the volume. And the reason is we're required to do audits or balancing audits. And so what we need to be able to do is actually come out to your farm, basically take a crop from seed to sales, look at all the inputs you used along the way, judge on the receipts. Did you actually buy enough of that fertilizer that it makes sense? Or is that one bag sitting over in the corner of the shed the only one you bought? You bought that 3 years ago. And so we're actually wanting to be able to follow it through, look at every input, and evaluate, did you buy enough of the correct stuff to actually produce that operation? And I should mention here, we do have operations that are parallel or are both certified organic as well as non-certified organic. So they have some field to where some crops are not. Anytime we have the same crop that is both, we call it parallel, and that does require a higher level of record keeping because we want to make sure you're not diverting some of that production from the non-certified acreage and selling it as organic. But that is something that's pretty common, so it's not unusual for us to see it, but do be aware we're going to expect a higher level of record keeping from those operations. So once the inspector conducts your inspection, they'll come back and actually write a report, and it will go to a final reviewer. This is important because the inspector does not make the decision. The reason that is set up that way is so there cannot be any sort of influence or anything like that happens. So you can pay off your inspector, but it's not going to help you get your certification. So quite honestly, I don't think I'd give it a try. So that final reviewer reviews it, and then if there were to be a problem, they would move to where they would have to issue a non-compliance. So what is a non-compliance? Sounds bad, but it's not nearly as bad as you first think. A notice of non-compliance is the result of something contrary to the regulations. They basically are correctable. The fact if we only issue a notice of non-compliance, there is some way that it can be corrected. If it couldn't be, we'd actually issue a different document. And you also have the right to rebut those. So sometimes an inspector can misunderstand a situation or write something down wrong. So don't think that just because we make a notice of non-compliance, you're stuck or you can't move forward. All it means is there's something that has to be addressed. Commonly, what we issue those for are lack of adequate records, using non-organic seed without first establishing certified was unavailable, failing to submit an application update by a deadline, because this is an annual process. And so it's minor things. It's not things that are basically related to the organic integrity. So if you have no non-compliances, or if it's resolved or rebutted, then you'd be issued an organic certificate. They look something like that. They actually are a paper certificate. I want to dwell just for a moment on input materials and reviewed materials. Let's go back to the OMRI list, Washington State Department of Agriculture, Pennsylvania Certified Organic, or our own reviews. We see many non-compliances because people forgot to take that extra step and confirm what a salesman said or what the local farm store said. And the reason is it gets complicated. For instance, you can use gypsum in certified organic operations, but it has to be gypsum from a mined source. So that's allowed. Gypsum from recycled wallboard is not allowed. But if you had gypsum from a mined source, but they added a dust suppressant during the processing, that would be not allowed if the dust suppressant was a prohibited product, and it very well could be. So that's why this gets complicated. You could have two mined gypsum products, one's allowed and one's not, for a very seemingly minor difference. So that's why the use of pre-approved products is encouraged, especially for newer novice growers. And again, I always stress to producers, never take the salesman's word for it. Not because they're dishonest, but because they're not going to be replacing the income you lose if you use the wrong product. So a few considerations for high tunnels. The biggest one I think that we have to worry about is pressure treated lumber whenever we're talking about the construction process. You can substitute in metal or engineered polymer products, and by that I mean things like Trex, kind of the plastic and wood mix. You can also use rot resistant woods. We've seen that done successfully. Transplants, again, this is key. You do either have to purchase from a certified organic greenhouse or grower, or be self-produced. And again, with self-produced, pay very close attention to all your inputs, even potting media or potting soil. It's very common that they add things such as adjuvants or surfactants to help peat moss, for instance, to take up water. So there's a lot of products that you cannot use. And so again, if you're using a prohibited product in that production and then subsequently planted those plants in that greenhouse, or high tunnel, that high tunnel would have to go through a 3-year transition process from a prohibited substance. So just be aware that this is very key. Additionally, already said this, but just to cover it again, certified organic first, may use untreated if you find certified is not available. So again, always establish the lack of availability first and then move on to untreated. And again, untreated means more than just no pesticides. And redundant once again, but input products. If there was one thing I would say is talk to an experienced grower and producer, see what they're using. If it's something that was not on a list, but they've gotten it approved through us, we really cannot consult with you. As your certifier, we're actually specifically prohibited from it. So if you called me up and said, Adam, I need to find a potassium fertilizer, what can I use? I'm probably going to tell you to look at the list. And the reason is I'm not supposed to tell you how to fix your problems because I'm the guy that's also supposed to come out and review that and see if you did it right. So because of that conflict of interest, it does create sometimes a barrier for new growers. And so I do think whenever you're talking inputs or methods, it's good to talk to experienced growers who've been certified and those who are willing to help. And it's quite a few, I think, in the organic community. It's welcoming to see that they embrace new growers and don't just think, oh, well, there's some competition. Real quickly, a few resources you can get to from our website. If you go to kyagr.com, that's the Department of Agriculture website, up at the top, you'll see a red tab. If you mouse over that, one of the options is Certified Organic Program or Organic Marketing. Click on that and you'll find our homepage with all the resources on it. To the right is a link for forms. Do pay attention to some of those resources because they're good. They're as bland as the federal regulations, but as good as things such as the ATRA documents that have been recently updated to reflect the organic regulations. And I find those very useful for growers who are considering organic certification but aren't really sure. So you may want to take a look at those. There's my contact info. Feel free to contact me as you see fit.
Okay, thanks so much, Adam. We have a few quick questions here that maybe you can cover while we're already on this topic. How would you go about proving the lack of commercial availability of a seed?
We require that farmers look at 3 reasonable sources. And what we mean by that is an entity that would reasonably be carrying organic certified seed. So, some of the common ones are things like Johnny's seed. A lot of farmers market producers source from there. They do carry organic. So just basically 3 reasonable sources. And I should mention, there are some varieties that are absolutely not available certified organic. And we know that. So you very well may find them to be unavailable. So it's not something that would be surprising to us, but just 3 reasonable sources.
Okay, great. And what about cedar for high tunnels? Is that able to be used?
Cedar would be perfectly acceptable. There'd be no restrictions on that.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. We'll get back to some questions later, but right now we'll move on to Dr. Tim Woods. Thanks for coming, Tim.
All right, thanks, Miranda. All right, so what I was asked to do is to shift gears just a little bit and look at some of the marketing opportunities and sort of directions that folks have gone as they've been producing products out of their high tunnel, whether it's certified organic or you're just conventional production. And so what I want to do is to work our way through a handful of considerations on the marketing strategy side, and I want to emphasize a couple of sort of directions that I think might be a little bit more promising and some directions that might perhaps be a little bit more challenging, but just hopefully just some things that particularly folks that are new to the high tunnel production are going to be thinking about on the marketing. So I think, of course, starting with the markets and where you're wanting to sell these products is a really important decision before you put the first post in the ground. And so lots of different justifications, as you can see here, opportunities for season extension, for farmers markets, for on-farm retailing, for lots and lots of different crops, having your market open longer, having more products available for a longer period of time. We're going to show, even with the season extending opportunities for CSA, some really encouraging opportunities for our folks marketing products in Kentucky. But there's also opportunities, of course, to use the high tunnels to do direct to restaurant, and even direct to grocery in some cases, to increase the length of time that you're able to bring product to market and to even improve the quality of product that you're going to be able to bring to market compared to what you might be able to generate through conventional field production. Certainly things like the farm to school markets that are traditionally off season anyway from our normal production season present some opportunities there as well. But as we move toward these lower markets on the list here, we're talking generally about larger volume, more wholesale type markets, and we're going to look at those in turn down the road. But to just kind of give you a little bit of a flavor for this here, you can look at just take tomatoes here, for example, and a lot of the opportunities that we see, particularly for direct marketing in Kentucky, are early season extensions. So being able to get products out to the market early. Just looking at some of our price reports that we have from our Center for Crop Diversification price reports, you can see early market tomatoes across our different markets running $2.50, $3.50 a pound. And of course, when everybody's got tomatoes, the market takes a hit and supply takes its impact on prices. And those July tomatoes typically ranging more in $1.25 to $2.25 a pound, and a lot more competition. We see high tunnel tomatoes appearing in Kentucky markets fairly early, and it's not just tomatoes. You can see greens, peppers, beans, cucumbers. Lots of products have really strong early markets and present some really good opportunity for our folks that are marketing products out of the different high tunnel season extension kind of programs. The other opportunity there is, of course, earlier diversification of products, and so some products that might be just the very early things that you see coming into a farmer's market in the spring, typically things I'm thinking like greens that are pretty much in every farmer's market the first couple of weeks that are open. If you have a high tunnel and you're able to generate some production and bring a wider variety of products to the farmer's market, that's going to make your market much more attractive to customers that are coming to purchase your products. Of course, a lot of interest in the local products to local markets. The Kentucky Proud marketing, the many different aspects in which all these different market channels that I've got listed here support local products and are interested in local products. And having high tunnels allows an expansion of the length of time in which these products can be made available to these different market channels that are placing a particular premium, not just on having products available, but having local products available presents some real opportunity. Many of you folks that have seen me make this presentation before, we talk about some of the different market channels that produce is being sold in, and you can see across these different market channels here the strong focus that we still have in Kentucky on a lot of direct marketing activity, but we've seen a lot of growth in the direct to restaurant, the produce auctions, farm to school, the CSAs, direct to retail, and a lot of that is being driven by the opportunities that are being seized through season extension technologies. And having producers point to some of these different market channels where they're expecting to see growth over the next few years, you see really pretty bullish, optimistic perspectives really across the board in all of those different markets. And high tunnels can be a really important contributor there in terms of what kinds of value and products in length of time when markets can be active in Kentucky. We continue to watch the steady expansion of the number of farmers markets nationally, the continued interest nationally in the local products that are available in local markets. And we've certainly seen that in Kentucky as well, over 2,500 vendors that we have here in the state. And for a lot of our folks that are involved in this direct marketing activity, having a high tunnel is a great way to supplement your inventory and to time your inventory to market in a way that is going to be really profitable. I'd like to just put this graphic up here just to think a little bit about some of the pros and cons about doing direct marketing and selling through a farmer's market. Of course, higher value markets, the smaller scale, lower packaging costs. A lot of farmers that are just starting out on a relatively small scale, a farmer's market venue is a really attractive platform to be able to sell a lot of products. And so we've certainly encouraged folks to pursue these higher value markets. But of course, some of the limitations are these markets can get easily flooded, and especially if you don't have any mechanism to be able to control the timing of when product is going to come to market, that you're not able to have a controlled environment where you're able to deal with some of the vagaries of weather, you're pretty much going to be stuck with when everybody else is bringing product to market. And so again, the high tunnels can help overcome some of those disadvantages to some extent. And there's limited growth opportunities, variable demand sometimes that we see typically with farmers markets, largely because of the scale of those markets. But the volume of product, the potential for the amount of sales that can go through a farmers market venue can be substantially increased when you have 3 or 4 more weeks open early, 3 or 4 more weeks open later in the season, to be able to move product that way. And so some valuable ways that high tunnels can bring some added value to the direct marketing opportunities. The Center for Crop Diversification provides a lot of different resources. And for some of you folks maybe that haven't had a chance to get in and look at some of the different resources, you know, one of the things that we keep on there are price reports. And these farm market price reports, I think, are really, really helpful to look at for some of the different crops that you're considering integrating into your high tunnel system, to kind of get a feel for some of the price premiums that are available early in the season or maybe later in the season, depending on which way you're trying to extend, can give you some really good feel for this. This is what a typical price report will look like. We'll have a number of different markets at different locations from across Kentucky. Typically, we try to aim for 8 to 10 different markets, and we'll have all the different types of products that are available in season at that time. So you have to dig a little bit to get some historical prices that would correspond to the markets that you're trying to sell at. But it would help you as you're trying to do some of your market planning there as well to get some idea. Even in farmers markets, you see some significant price swings as supply increases through the market season. So pay attention to those. There are a variety of other market channels where high tunnels have become really important. The community-supported agriculture, subscription-based delivery programs, more and more of our farms that are using the CSA marketing model are using high tunnels as a way to expand the number of weeks when they're able to offer products available. And I'm going to touch on that here in just a little bit, but certainly the farm to school and direct to restaurant provides a great opportunity to both control quality and to increase the volume of production that you're able to provide to these markets over a season. We just completed what I think is a really interesting national study of CSA managers. These are managers that have had some experience working with these subscription-based programs. And one of the things that we're looking at in this national study, we're trying to understand what kinds of changes that they've had management-wise, technology-wise, production-wise with their CSA. And a lot of busy numbers up here. Just one thing I wanted to point out here to you that I found to be really interesting, and if you can note it here, the season extension technologies that have these managers from across the country are saying they've increased a lot. As you compare that to what we're seeing with some of these other kinds of changes in the CSA business function, business activity, it's really striking to me to see how the use of high tunnels and these other kinds of season extension technologies are almost ubiquitous. They're really everywhere, and certainly as we're in climate areas like Kentucky and parts north, these season extension technologies become even more attractive and a really good risk management strategy and marketing strategy to be able to provide some assurances of the quality and quantity of production, for example, that would be sold into a CSA type model. And so lots of folks that have taken advantage of this, and I think part of the reason why we're seeing a lot of expansion and growth in the CSA marketing model in general. There are a lot of really good direct marketing resources I'm just going to put these up here, and you can come back and refer to these links a little bit later on, whether you're talking about more interest in the farmers market activity, the Farm Bureau Certified Roadside Market Program. There are good resources that are available here in each one of these resources for marketing in general. And so just want to make sure that you have access to those. One of the things I really feel like it's important also to mention here is part of your marketing program is certainly being mindful of the market channels and market partners that you're going to be working with. But as soon as that product is being harvested, you have started your marketing program. And so the attention that you pay to your post-harvest handling is going to be a really important consideration in a high tunnel system. So one of the mantras that they have out there in the produce marketing world is, if you want it sold, keep it cold, and having the right kind of packaging that's going to be able to preserve the quality of that product, having something like, for example, even the small, simple, portable, on-farm cold storage unit, or having some kind of cold storage system is going to be really important. And so you might be thinking, why are we talking about keeping product cold in a season extension environment? Getting any kind of field heat out of production, even if it's coming out of a high tunnel, is going to be really helpful. And having cold storage that is going to be able to be a place where you can put your tomatoes, your peppers, your other kinds of products, where you can be keeping the field heat or the high tunnel heat out of that product, will extend the shelf life, preserve the quality of that product, and help enhance your marketing activity to any of these channels. This particular example up here is this portable unit was something that was designed by John Wilhoit, and we've got a link down here where you can hopefully be able to upload that program and be able to look at Dr. Wilhoit's kind of design and specifications on that, and specifically designing it for folks that are relatively small scale, looking for a relatively low cost option for some cold storage. All right, the last couple of things that I wanted to just talk about a little bit, because we have a lot of folks that are expanding beyond the farmers market, beyond the on-farm retail market, and looking at some of these markets that typically reflect a little bit more of a wholesale type price. And so a question will come up often as you think about expanding scale and the volume of product. Do these kinds of high tunnel production systems fit in any way with any kind of a wholesale market, even if it's just complementing what I'm trying to do there? And what I want to suggest here is that you want to look at this very carefully to understand your costs. There are certainly some possible market windows for some of our produce auctions I'll show you here shortly. For some of our stores where you're doing some direct store delivery to some grocery markets, that may make sense in some cases, but you have to be really, really careful and mindful of the price that you're going to get. The cost to produce most of these products in these high tunnel environments is relatively expensive, and we're going to come back to the importance of that here in just a minute. Certainly when you're dealing in these wholesale markets, you're dealing with more competition, and it's more difficult to differentiate your product from some others, and so you need to really be mindful of your break-even prices. And we've talked about this in an earlier webinar in terms of the economics underneath this. I just wanted to just look a little bit at our produce auction prices, because this is another very active market. We have over 700 vendors that are selling in produce auctions around the state right now, and a lot of these folks actually have high tunnels and are using that to supplement their production activity. And just like with the farmers market price reports, the Center for Crop Diversification has a long-standing archive of really, really good produce auction reports that have been provided to us from most of our produce auctions that we have from around the state. And here's a sample price report from the Casey County produce auction that shows the description of the different products, high price, low price, average price that you'll see, the volume, quantity of product that's being sold in that particular period of time. And for any of these products, whether you're looking at tomatoes, greens, whatever type product that might be produced in a high tunnel, if some of that may be headed for an auction, you want to be understanding what are the prices that you're going to get there. I pulled these prices here out of the last couple of years price reports for the Fairview Produce Auction, and just look at this with me for a minute. You can see, as you might expect, early in the marketing season, the price for a U.S. number one tomato, the higher quality grade, 20-pound box, well up above $20, $30 even early in the spring. But you get on here toward July, when a lot of the field tomatoes start coming in, you can see, as you would expect, those tomato prices really take a nosedive when you've got a lot of field tomatoes that are coming in into the market there as well. And so by this time, a lot of folks are just not really seeing the role of the high tunnel in the middle of the summer being able to compete very well. It does pick up a little bit later into the fall in terms of once the field tomatoes start to come out, but it's interesting to me, it's not quite as pronounced as what you see in terms of the premium early in the season. A couple of numbers I want to just bring to your attention here that I think might be kind of interesting. The North Carolina State has a nice little enterprise budget that they do for high tunnels, specifically for tomatoes. And if you notice here, the estimated cost for producing a 20-pound box of tomatoes in a high tunnel at the farm is $18.80. And you see early in the season, you can actually make money producing those tomatoes at $18.80, but it's going to fall off fast. You're going to be losing money fast off into the middle of the season. And only in a few cases out here are you going to be able to make it back up in the fall. So a lot of the benefit for, in this case for tomatoes, is going to be in the early season market. The other thing that I keep a very close eye on is the growth that we see in the volume of production that is coming in from our international markets. A lot of this, of course, is driven by much lower relative labor costs. And these folks have traditionally been in Mexico and certainly in Canada as well, targeted either the winter market or the high quality market, which is exactly what we're trying to target with our high tunnel production. And so you can see what has happened here just over the last 10, 15 years or so in terms of the growth of the amount of product that is coming in with respect to tomatoes, for example, so that just a few years ago, we actually became a net importer of tomatoes. And this trend is just continuing to move along this way, where our actual production here in the United States of fresh market tomatoes has just been steadily declining, while the import volume has been just steadily increasing. And it's really our high tunnel tomato production that we're going to find particularly going toe-to-toe with this product that's coming in from Mexico or from Canada in the Canadian greenhouse production. Here you can see really as a response, again, to the relatively higher labor costs and the expansion of both field tomato and protected agriculture production system tomatoes, from Mexico. We've just seen this steady decline in production in our major tomato production states. Fewer acres that are being planted there in terms of field production. And really, in general, this is to me kind of the interesting takeaway, just to talk about protected agriculture for a minute in general. Look at what is happening here with the growth in protected agriculture systems and imports that are coming in from Mexico. A big part of that product coming in from Mexico is also being produced in greenhouses and other kinds of protected ag systems. So we hardly have the corner on protected agriculture and high tunnel systems ourselves. The long and the short of it is, a lot of these opportunities that we're looking at in developing these high tunnels are really more looking at the market opportunities opening up in relatively narrow windows in local markets. And so some good opportunities, but go in with your eyes wide open in terms of what kind of competition, what kinds of volume you're going to be looking at. Choose your production system based on your market opportunities. Okay, so if you think that the high tunnel system is going to be right for you, do it intentionally because you see a good market opportunity that's out there. And this last bullet point here, to direct your high tunnel production to markets that are going to be willing to pay a premium for quality and for timing of these products that are coming to market. So I guess with that, Miranda, I'll turn it back to you, and maybe there are a couple of questions perhaps folks have.
Yes, thank you, Tim. So next we'll be moving on to the question and answer session, but before we get there, I just want to let you know that a copy of this presentation, along with a few other documents, is available in the files to download sort of pod there in the left corner of your screen. And then those things will also be available on our events page at the Center for Crop Diversification's website once the recording is available, hopefully within a day or two. And then can you click to the next one, please? Thank you. So if you have questions, type them in for us. We'll get there shortly. And then one more. We also would like you to fill out this quick survey about how this webinar went for you. We do really appreciate and listen to this feedback, so please let us know how this worked out for you. So without further ado, thank you both for being here, and we'll get on to questions. For Tim, are the profits higher on organic versus non-organic, being that the organic route seems very strict?
They're different markets with different production cost systems. And I guess I'll say the growth in the demand for organic products has just continued to grow. And whether you're talking retail grocer markets, whether you're talking CSA markets, it's just been a steady growing market in terms of demand. But I'm reluctant to just come right out and flatly say one market is more profitable than the other. Part of it's going to be driven on the particular market that a particular producer is wanting to target, and in either case, it's going to be incumbent on a producer to have a clear understanding of what is the price that they're going to be able to get relative to their cost of production, and to be able to proceed in a way that's going to be profitable. I'll just add this too, and Adam can certainly weigh in on this as well, but when you're making a commitment to organic production, it's not the sort of thing that you just flip on one year, flip off another year. You're making a long-term commitment. And so just like you're making the long-term commitment to building your production system, you need to take a long-term view, I think, to building your markets that way as well.
Absolutely. I think it does come down to market. I've had some certified producers tell me it allows them to distinguish themselves. I don't think you can assume it will always be more profitable. I've had some certified producers tell me they do not charge a premium over what their competitors in the farmers market charge for conventional produce, because they say if we do at our market, people won't buy from us. So some markets are more price sensitive than others. So I think it is a very individual statement. Sometimes you do see the higher cost per pound in the store or somewhere else, and you automatically assume, well, obviously, it's more profitable. I don't think you can take that away. Typically, organic production is less per unit, like per acre. So you do have to take that in consideration. It's not an absolute guaranteed positive net return over conventional.
Okay, thank you both. This one's probably for Tim. With regard to farm to school sales, is organic certification required?
If a producer is wanting to label their product as organic, certified as organic product to a school, to any market, yes, they have to have it certified. But most school systems will work with conventional production, organic production. You just need to be clear. If you are marketing your product as certified organic, really a good protocol is to provide a copy of your organic certification, set up a vendor file with the school so that they can have a copy of that. Because if the school is going to put that product out there and promote it even to the kids as this is organic product, the school has to be able to have a paper trail, some kind of traceability to be able to show if there's a question that they are using that organic marketing label appropriately.
Okay, great. Thank you. And do either of you know the recommended temperature range for storage of product, like you were talking about in your cool storage systems?
It varies greatly depending on what product you're talking about. There's some good extension publications that you should be able to locate without too much difficulty. That does give you a good range. There is kind of some happy medium temperatures, but it really depends exactly what you're talking about and even how long you're wanting to store it.
Definitely. Thank you. I think the next question is, do you have costs comparing low tunnels to high tunnels and field grown produce?
Not really. It's a great question, and those are enterprise budgets that probably need to be developed. This is all relatively new, this whole protected agriculture environment, and there have been a variety of protected agricultural systems utilized. A lot of them are kind of, I'll just say, ad hoc systems that are put together by individual producers that differ considerably farm to farm, and so not always having just a simple conventional, but we need to be able to look at those kinds of comparative systems better. In my earlier webinar, we talked a little bit about just the approximate cost per square foot of row covers versus lower cost high tunnels versus higher cost high tunnels versus greenhouses. And there's certainly a wide range from 50 cents a square foot to $30 a square foot.
Yes. Yeah, and like Tim said, that information was on our first webinar, and that recording is available on the Center for Crop Diversification website if you would like more information about that stuff in particular. I think there's also the Iowa State high tunnel budgets,
right,
that we've found are very helpful, and they are again located in the files to download pod here on the webinar today. Another question is, are people heating high tunnels to extend the season even more?
That's neither of us are high tunnel technician folks, but I'll just qualify that and we probably need to raise that with Shubin or somebody. But you with the EQIP program specifically, those high tunnels are not designed particularly for heating, and so there's all kinds of trouble that you can run into with heating. But there are some really innovative things that folks have done with this protected ag. That's why it's so difficult to just put out their costs for systems that everybody recognizes. I've seen all kinds of different adaptations.
Yeah, I believe last week in our webinar with Shubin and Krista, they talked about people not really heating with their high tunnels to extend the season even longer, but that on really, really cold nights, that might not be a bad option to somehow get a space heater out there. And again, be careful what you're doing in those high tunnels. But if that is something that you really feel like you need to provide for your plants, that's something to think about. And like Tim said, we might contact Shubin about that specifically and what might be a safe way to do it, and maybe some not so safe ways you should stay away from. So I think at this point, that's all the questions that we've got today. So we'll stick around here for another minute or two, and we'll give you some time to download those files that are available. But otherwise, thank you all very much for attending. And like we said, hopefully in a day or two, the recording will be available on the Center for Crop Diversification website. And again, contact any of us with any further questions or follow-up as you're getting into the season, as you're starting to fill out those applications for organic certification and stuff like that. So I just want to thank Tim and Adam one more time. So we really appreciate you coming out and doing this for folks.
You're very welcome.
Yeah.
So thank you very much and have a great week. We'll see you next week.